Welcome to Building My Legacy podcast. This podcast is designed for leaders and entrepreneurs who want to leave a legacy and will provide strategies that focus upon key elements for legacy creation, determining your desired impact and its benefit, increasing your legacy's reach by engaging key stakeholders, planning, prioritizing, and executing. Here's your host, Dr. Lois Sonstegard.
Welcome, everybody, to Building My Legacy podcast. I'm here again today with Kate Fitzsimons. She has been absolutely wonderful being with us now for 6 sessions. This is our 7th session we're having tonight. And we are talking about how do you reduce anxiety. So if you remember, we are going to be talking about the 3 R's that she uses for building resilience, because everything that we're dealing with that are challenges requires us to find some resilience somewhere. And especially now with what we're dealing with COVID-19, we really do need to look deep within for resilience. But how do we do that? How do we take anxiety, for example, and reduce it? And so she's going to apply her 3 R's. Recognize, reflect, redirect.
And that's it, Lois.
I got it. And then looking at
ingrained in your brain.
What are those ants? The automatic negative thinking that we bring that really impact how we respond. So Kate, I'll let you take it from there. You've been so wonderful.
Oh, no, well, thank you for having me back. And if everyone's now joining us for the 7th episode, thank you for hanging in there. It's an absolute honor to be doing this series for you all and to be teaming up with Lois. I look forward to every time we get to sit down and record. And I'm really excited for this episode in particular. I think it's such an important one for us to do alongside all of my teachings, that I've really been exploring throughout this series of how it really is our own thoughts, which creates our own feelings and drives our actions and creates our results, and how I'm really teaching you all to step up and take responsibility for it all. Just because I found once people gain this awareness and understanding, they actually sometimes begin to use it against themselves and actually begin to judge themselves a little bit, like, oh my goodness, I'm feeling so stressed or so anxious right now and I shouldn't. It's all just my thinking, but it's all my fault. I should know better than this by now. And, we really begin to judge ourselves like, gosh, I shouldn't be thinking that. I should be thinking more positively, and then I wouldn't be feeling so anxious. So I just really want to make clear that thought swapping instantly isn't really the aim of the game here. My work isn't about trying to get you to a place where you feel positive all the time. As a coach, I really just want you to help you understand why you feel what you feel, but that doesn't mean that you should want to or have to instantly try to change that feeling, if it is a negative one. And in fact, doing that only really intensifies the emotion because we're like resisting and fighting against it, right? And in fact, that's a consequence that's coming from this whole, overly positive thinking kind of movement that always really does try to always endorse the glass as, half full and always be happy kind of idea, which I'm all about. Sometimes if thinking that way is actually really helpful and useful for you in that moment. But, if we're often, if we're in the middle of an intense meeting with a high paying client, or our friend has just been diagnosed with cancer, or we've just found out that we've lost our job because of COVID-19, like sometimes things are going to happen in life where it's actually very healthy, very appropriate, very natural for us to feel negative emotion. It's appropriate as a human to respond to something unwanted or unexpected, with some sort of negative feelings and negative and sad thoughts about that. So if we try to thought swap too quickly and skip the part where we feel and process that emotion, we end up sometimes making it far more intense. right? So that's why I'm going to focus this episode on this kind of idea of, when positive thinking isn't working, isn't appropriate, isn't really realistic for you in that moment, and you're really beginning to feel the anxiety or the stress or the overwhelm set in. I want to teach you one of the most important skills that school forgets to teach us. And that is
Wow.
how to, I know, that's a big claim, isn't it? But when I take you through it, you might understand why. Because again, this is going to bring such awareness to some of your behaviors and emotions. But the skill is, Lois, it's the skill of how to feel our feelings.
Oh, how to feel
Now,
them. Okay.
how to feel your feelings, okay? I really believe it is a skill, and it's one of the most important skills that we can learn how to do in this lifetime, but no one really teaches us how to do this. And in fact, I've found that the way that we're kind of brought up and the way that society's kind of, the culture and the mentality of a lot of it is there's three main responses when we feel really intense negative emotions: stress, anxiety, overwhelm, fear. The first one, there's two R's and then a D. So there's slightly different R's this time. But the
Two
first
R's
one,
and a what?
I think the last one is it's a distraction, D or an E. I'll go with the D because it's like distracting yourself. But yeah, there's not three. The first one is resisting our emotions. Okay. So many of us think that resisting the emotion is the same as feeling it, but it's very different. It's literally that idea of, you feel the stress come up and your friend's like, you okay? You're like, no, I'm fine. I shouldn't feel upset. Don't worry. And you like almost try and push it under the rug. Like, don't even look at what you're thinking. Don't even deal with it. It's kind of like, the difference between like, trying to hold the door shut and having someone fighting against it, or almost like trying to push a beach ball beneath the water and like trying to push and resist and push and push. And of course, eventually someone's going to come flying through the door in the big way, or, the beach ball's going to just burst up into the air because of all that pressure and resistance. It's going to intensify and create more tension around that emotion. So I feel like so many of us, it's kind of like getting anxious about feeling anxious or stressed about feeling stressed. Like we layer the emotion and the pressure. And of course that, is flooding more stress hormones, flood through our body, and we get the shortness of breath, breath and everything. So I think that's what ultimately leads to things like panic and anxiety attacks and things like that. Like when you resist emotion, you're actually giving an ammunition to what you're fighting against. And so that's one of the main ways I've found is you don't even want to deal with it. You just resist it. Have you ever had times like that in your life, Lois?
I have. And I've done it and I've seen other people do it. And I think whenever I resist, what happens is eventually sometime it comes up, but it always comes up worse than if I had dealt with it right then. And I think when I'm most afraid, that's when I resist, or when I feel like there might be a huge loss. I felt that with around one of my parents' deaths was let me resist it because it's too much to take in. And sometimes you have to do that because you need time to kind of catch up with yourself. But if you do it too long, you pay a price for it.
Yes. Like I said, it's like rather than just having the ball floating next to you in the water, by pushing it down, it's just going to come up in a bigger way. Like there's a quote, I can't remember who says it, but that's the thing about feelings. They demand to be felt, like you can't escape them forever. But of course we kind of try because of this idea that something's gone wrong when we feel that negative emotion, or they can feel all consuming. Like if we allow ourselves to feel them, then it's going to completely take us over. And there is some things I want to chat about later on, but I will go firstly into the next that we're looking at here, and that is just instantly reacting to our feelings. You might know them as hotheads. So
you always
they feel
regret
something
it later.
Yes. Yeah. So you feel the anger, the stress set in, and you're flying off the wall. You're yelling, you're screaming, you're snapping at someone, you're being short-tempered. But having a hissy fit, everyone, having a meltdown is not the same as actually feeling your feelings. We're kind of just acting out the emotion without really processing and feeling them at all. Right. And of course, that has consequences to that behavior. More negative impact on your life and relationships with other people when you aren't just always instantly reacting to your negative emotion. But what I want to show you is you can actually feel negative emotion without moving or doing anything at all. You do not have to act out the emotion to feel it. And I'll explain a little more of that soon, but you can feel intense anger and actually be sitting very calmly in a chair. It's crazy, but it's true. And learning that skill can be huge.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying it. I'm not perfect. It's a practice, but it's fascinating when you actually break down, which I will shortly, what a feeling really is. You can see how that is true.
How fun.
But
I can't wait. Yeah, how
yes,
fun.
but the last one is, I said, the distracting ourselves, escaping our emotion, which is something our current culture really encourages. In a culture that's filled with instant gratification, instant pleasure, instant fun, instant everything. We can eat, drink, buy, do pretty much anything we want at the drop of a hat. Not so much at the moment, but even within the four walls of our own home when we're stuck at home, there's always quick hits of fun around. We never really have to stay present with our emotions because there's things like Netflix and online shopping and drinking and overeating. But of course, that's great in the moment, but then often what's on the other side of that, Lois?
Oh, depression, anxiety.
Yeah, because there's a negative consequence to that action, right? Like suddenly we're over shopping online and we're in financial trouble, or we're spending so much time on our phones or watching Netflix that we lose connection with our loved ones. Our relationships go down, or suddenly we're eating so much that physically our bodies just start to ache and feel unwell. So it's not the most helpful way to be dealing, and healthy way for us to deal with our emotions, because of the consequences that it has in our physical, mental, and financial well-being. But it feels like that's, again, one of the only choices that we have. But tying it all together, all in all, whether we're resisting, reacting, or distracting ourselves, this is kind of just taking us, I guess what I'm taking you through is that moment of just reflecting upon this idea that, so that second R, that all of these ways are just going to have us kind of perpetuating the emotions and making us even more anxious about being anxious, or feeling more ashamed about feeling ashamed, and kind of creating more harm than good to ourselves and those around us. Would you agree, Lois?
Yeah, boy, it becomes a vicious cycle once you start.
Yeah. So if we take it back, the first R is to recognize your own thinking here, which of course is always just by separating out the facts and really seeing that in this case, I just want you all to recognize it. If you recognize, oh, I'm feeling anxious here, the temptation is then to say, I shouldn't be feeling that way, right? Or there's something that's wrong. I'm anxious and I shouldn't be. I need to fix this quickly. That's kind of the idea that society puts on it. So we just, that is then what is then leading to us to resist, react, or distract. We just want to get rid of it. We just want to escape. We either want to push it out with reacting, force it away with resisting, or just run away from it with distraction, right? So then we reflect that, of course, this then just leads us to unhelpful kind of behaviors and actions. And so I've really recognized that anxiety in within itself isn't the real problem. It's thinking that anxiety or negative emotion is a problem and is something that we need to fight against, as if it's something that we can't or shouldn't be feeling. That's the real problem. Like,
Wow.
so often people don't even know what it is like to feel anxious. All they know is the resistance to it, that trying to run from it feeling. So now that we've recognized and reflected upon that, the third R that we have the choice to do is, of course,
Redesign,
Lois,
redirect.
redirect. That is it.
Redirect.
Our mind in a way that really allows us to open up and relax into the process of really feeling that emotion rather than like tensing up and closing up and fighting against it. Now, it's a 5-step process, and it starts like this. The first step is to just name it in one word. Really name and recognize, like, what is this feeling? This is anxiety. This is worry. This is shame. This is sadness. Now, you'd be surprised. I do this a lot in my coaching. We have such kind of limited emotional awareness. I feel like that when I say to someone, like, how are you feeling? They'll be like, I'm just feeling like there's too much to do. Everything's going wrong. And we're actually just identifying thoughts there. So often we're all caught up in our head that we don't even really have the emotional awareness of what we're feeling. So the best way I say you recognize a feeling is it's just one word, a one-word kind of description of how it feels. Because as soon as you can name the emotion, you kind of get some sort of separation from it. You can describe it as something that isn't who you are, isn't something you're being, but something that is separate from you. So when you say, like, I'm feeling anxiety, that's a different experience to I am anxious. Like, you're not anxious, you're Sarah, and you're feeling anxiety, right? You don't want to define who you are by that feeling. So just saying, like, right now I'm feeling anxiety, I'm feeling shame, not I am ashamed, that kind of takes over your whole being. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
separating the event from who you are as a person, because otherwise our minds really close off because we don't want to think that we're terrible, unreachable, or whatever, right?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
want
And
to,
just kind of recognizing, like, that feeling isn't your whole identity.
yeah.
It hasn't taken you over. You want to recognize it and, like, I'm feeling anxiety. Like, putting that word feeling and just seeing it for what it is and not who you are is super powerful. The next step is to find it and describe the feeling in your body. Okay. So many people, it's funny, they don't even really they've never taken the time to slow down and get out of their heads where all the thoughts are flying around and into the physical sensation of what that feeling actually feels like in your body. So, for example, Lois, what's a negative emotion you tend to struggle with the most?
Oh, you know what? When I get really anxious, it's because I feel like I failed somebody.
Okay.
So
So,
failure would be the one
okay. So,
word.
well, okay. So let's look at this here. This is interesting. So, you feel anxious because you're thinking, I've failed someone. Okay. So, recognize the thought that's causing you to feel anxious is I've failed someone. Okay. But right now, if you're feeling that anxiety really intensely, I'm not interested on doing the thought work with you yet and trying to convince you otherwise or show you your other options. I want to show you that it's okay to feel anxious, right? So let's just stay with the anxiety. So where do you feel anxiety the most in your body?
Either I'll get a knot in my back or a headache. Those are usually the
Okay.
two places.
So in your back and in your head, is it a sharp or a dull kind of feeling?
In the back, it's a like like a like it's tight. Has wound it up and it's tight. With headache, it's usually a sharp. It's frontal. It's usually in the front of the head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And is it a hot or cold feeling in your body?
Often it can be either, but often it's a cold feeling.
Okay. And last one, if it was a color, if anxiety was a color, what color would it be for you?
Red.
Red. Okay. So this is what I call really slowing down and beginning to process and getting to know that feeling for what it is, the feeling, the physical sensations that it's causing in your body. Like for me, anxiety is very different. Like I feel the churning more, I'm more in my stomach and the tightness in my chest, right? So I think it's really interesting in the way that the same feeling physically, comes through differently in each of our bodies. But when I feel one I'm very familiar with, unfortunately, is grief, right? Like grief for me is deep, like twisting feeling in my chest. Sometimes even like a stabbing pain kind of feeling. But I think it's really good for us when we're feeling that emotion intensely to get out of our heads and into our body and getting to realize like, oh, okay. So when I feel anxious, I can know to expect this feeling and asking our questions like, by asking you those questions, if you were feeling anxiety really intensely in that moment, what I'm doing is getting your brain directed away from all the thoughts that are, causing the anxiety about the failure and what happened, and just getting you to stay present with yourself in that moment and process through what that feeling actually is, because that kind of helps your brain go from like the creator of the emotion to the watcher of it. Right. So again, you're getting some sort of separation and beginning to realize that anxiety and with itself, if we don't have to fear it, okay, it's uncomfortable vibrations in our body causing different sensations, but nothing's gone wrong. Yeah. So as soon as you kind of shift your focus and take deliberate control of your brain and have it pay attention to what's really going on in your body with that emotion, it stops the incessant creation of it. So that's super powerful. I have like a 1-page sheet that I have like when I'm feeling my grief really intensely and things like that. I'm just slowing down and getting in to my body and realizing that I don't have to escape this. It's kind of like, feeling like that feeling of like a tiger chasing you and you're running and you're running and you're running and it's just exhausting and you feel like can never stop. But if you kind of slow down for a moment and be like, hey, I might just get to know him a little and, just slow down. It's, it kind of takes away all the power that it often you feel like it has over you. So once you begin to, describe it and become aware of how it physically feels, the next step is to just relax into that emotion, because most of us with negative emotion want to resist and tense up and push it away. But the key is really to actually relax your body into it. Relax your muscles, your shoulders, your face, your hands, wherever you feel about it. Think about relaxing into that stress and anxiety that's in your chest or your hands or your neck. Really kind of breathe into it, kind of as if you're just going to take that beach ball that you were trying to push deeply beneath the surface of the water, and suddenly you're just going to allow it to float beside you and just be there with you. And once you're taking that moment to relax in it, just take a moment to own it. And this kind of goes back to my original teaching of so for you, Lois, that shift would be, I'm feeling anxious because I failed someone. Owning it is making the shift of I'm feeling anxious because I'm thinking I failed someone. Own that emotion isn't coming over you from the outside world, but from sentences in your brain. That's it. Like, I think it's fascinating when you think about what you're experiencing with that emotion, however extreme or intense or uncomfortable it is, it's all just coming from sentences in our mind, our thoughts. So when I'm feeling an emotion really strongly, really intensely, I don't try to go figure out what the thoughts or sentences are when I'm feeling that way, it's just not the most appropriate time. But all the while through, how I stop myself from going into complete helplessness and panic mode is just reminding myself, this is uncomfortable, this is anxiety, but this is all just from sentences in my mind. Because that reminds me that when I am ready, when I have got to the other side of processing this, these are thoughts that I can begin to change and work on and redirect. So this is important to keep reminding ourselves of sentences in my mind. So you're not the victim to your feelings. You are ultimately still the creator of them because of those sentences that you can work on when you're ready.
You know, no, I think it's so beautiful. And I think so the first image that came to my mind is like of Tai Chi, where when somebody is going to kick you or hit you or attack you, our first reaction is to go like this right back, right? So now you've got this energy and that, and they collide, and you can get hurt. But what Tai Chi teaches you is to take that strike, move with it. So it's like a bamboo tree. You're bending with it. And then when you have bent and you feel the energy beginning to release, you go forward. But it's not with a jerky movement. It's a consistent movement,
I love that. I'll have to look up that move and see it. I'd probably be, because I always love a good analogy too to show something. So yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And it's something that we just don't really talk about, because feeling your feelings sounds really fluffy and like but it's actually one of the bravest things you can learn how to do and to slow down. And it's a gift I think you can give to yourself to really just reduce the suffering. We can feel, it's natural to feel anxiety, but I think we cause ourselves to compound it in so many unnecessary ways. So the last step to the 5 steps of, first of all, naming it, describing it, relaxing into it, owning it. The 5th step is to just allow it to be there. Allow the feeling until it begins to subside. And then a lot of people want to say, well, how long do I have to allow it for? How long do I have to process this for? And the answer is as long as it takes. As long as you need to. Like, I can't give you an exact time that's going to be like, well, the anxiety will be up in 30 minutes. But because I'm sure you've experienced it as well, it's kind of like it comes and goes like waves lapping at a beach. You'll feel it, you'll relax into it, you'll picture it in your body, you'll feel the discomfort, you'll kind of process through it, and then you'll be like, oh, where did it go? But then a few minutes later, it might be back again. And then you'd be like, oh, there it is. There's the stress. And you just go through this process again. And in time, although you'll feel like these feelings might keep coming, they won't come as intensely anymore. And that's how you know you've been processing through it. And if they're not feeling as intense now and you feel you got a handle over it a bit, that's when you can begin to go back into your mind and begin to play with, do the thought work in the 3 R's, begin to shift your pattern of thinking for the better. I'm all for that. But most especially, my number one thing that I'm most passionate about is really helping everyone stay present with themselves and with their human experience. And for me, that means I'm all about embracing the 50% rule. And by that I mean just embracing, owning, opening up. As much as we don't necessarily wish it was this way, this is the reality of it. It's about 50-50, right? 50% of your life is going to be fun, awesome, rewarding, beautiful stuff. And then about 50% of life is going to be ugly, painful, disappointing, filled with setbacks and selfish people and tragedy. It's going to be dropping your coffee on your white shirt on a Monday morning on the way to work, or getting caught in traffic and missing a meeting. It's going to be your mum diagnosed with cancer, or, the coronavirus pandemic taking over the world. It's going to be icky and unfair and unpredictable. So do you know what that means, Lois?
Those are ants. Those are lots of negative thinking that you put into your mind, right?
Yeah, well, I think though, if we can embrace that 50% of the human experience is challenging and hard and things that we naturally want to feel disappointed or upset or sad or grief or pain over, like, let's open up and and own like 50% of the time you were going to have to experience some negative emotion, because we don't necessarily want to feel happy about our friend losing our job, or, I don't want to necessarily feel happy about the fact I have no idea when I'm going to see my boyfriend again, right? Because I think so much of that negative emotion is coming from a well-intended place of love and care for other people and wanting the best for this world. So naturally, we will feel some sadness or grief or loss or disappointment. And I think we need to open up and just accept that for the thrill of getting to experience what it's like to be a human being on this planet at this point in time, you will experience some adversity, and with some adversity naturally is going to come negative emotion, and that's okay. Nothing's gone terribly wrong. We don't have to rush to a therapist the moment we wake up and we're feeling sad or disappointed, because sometimes, let's be honest, we don't even have to have things to happen for us to feel that way. You know what? Sometimes you can even just wake up and feel anxious, and it's all okay, because sometimes we're going to have some thoughts beneath our awareness that may naturally cause us to feel anxious. But when we have this expectation that we should feel happy all the time and, buy into trying to live in the perfect world of social media where everything's always great all the time, rather than the reality of the world that we live in that has adversity in it every single day, that's when we begin to layer our emotions and have anxiety about our anxiety and all of that stuff. But what I found super helpful when I can feel anxiety or grief setting in, rather than being like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? I need to fix this. I love just to sometimes remind myself like, that's that 50%. There's my quarter of the 50% of, of the negativity, of the heart of the challenge. But it is this 50% of ugliness in the world that makes the 50% of beauty in this world possible. Right? We need that contrast. Like, without sadness or without grief, how would we truly know what happiness or joy felt like, right? Like, if we were happy all the time, it wouldn't even be happiness, because it'd just be how we felt. But you know what really builds the depth of how great, feeling proud of yourself is? It's the disappointment, right? It's that contrast. We know how to really feel grateful once we've lost something, right? Like, we've lost the opportunity to just go out and be with our friends right now. So we're feeling incredibly grateful for even just the simplest of things. So as adults, I think we all need to accept that negative emotions are a part of the deal of getting to be human. And it's half of our lives that is really hard and challenging, that provides the contrast to make the other half possible. If someone had sat me down in 10th grade and just really realigned my expectations to that 50-50, and it doesn't mean something's gone wrong, I think it would have saved me so many meltdowns over the years if they'd really taught me, like, yes, it's healthy to feel negative emotion. This is how you process it, and really embraced it as part of my human experience. I think I would have saved myself a lot, because for me, I had an eating disorder. I distracted myself away through food because I didn't know how to feel my feelings. So this would have been life-changing for me. So that's that.
I think it is life-changing, Kate. And I think when I am able to be in my feelings, when I feel them, that's when I become the most human. That's when later I can reach out to other people the most, because I've been here. I can say, yep, I know what you're dealing with, because I've been there. And so it's, a part of me says, oh, I hate going through it, but it's also a gift, because it allows me to connect with human beings.
Yeah, we can all remember and just be like, it's the deal, the 50-50. Like, it's always been a part of this world. What I think might be helpful also to finish with is just actually defining what a feeling actually is. Because when I often do this in coaching, I'm like, what's a feeling? Like, what's an emotion? I use them interchangeably. I think at a very scientific level, they might be slightly differently. But to me, a feeling, emotion, like, what is it? And people are like, it's a feeling. Like, I know, right? Like, no one's ever really defined it to me before until I dived into this coaching world. And I realized, like, a feeling is just a chemical vibration in our body. So we have a thought, it releases a chemical in our body that vibrates through, and that experience is what we call a feeling or emotion. Okay. And that is just such a good way to kind of break it down a little. I remember that feelings, although they can be incredibly uncomfortable and extreme sometimes, they are harmless. Our body knows how to process emotion just like it knows how to process food. It's what it's designed to do if we allow our body the chance to do that and stay present with ourselves while that process goes on, and not skip the part, not even give our bodies the chance to feel our emotions through. So that's what I'm always reminding myself. And I think for me, my grief has been such a gift in learning how to process emotion, because it's the one emotion that I didn't want to run away from. I want to stay present with my grief because I realize I'm grieving not because I lost my sister, but because I love her. So it really isn't something. And then it showed me that even the most extreme emotions, none of them last forever. In fact, psychologists have proved that each emotion is about 90 seconds. No emotion lasts longer than that. So, they can keep coming in waves because we keep having thoughts that keep creating those feelings, but each individual emotion is no more than 90 seconds. So no emotion's ever going to forever engulf your existence. But it will if we keep resisting it. That is what exhausts us, depletes us, leads to all these, what I call like buffering behaviors, and we're trying to like run away from how we feel. But if you can just remind yourself, your body was designed to do this. Since the beginning of time, human beings have known how to process grief and terror and humiliation back when they didn't even have all the fun things to distract themselves with, like back in the day. So I think if we can kind of just remind ourselves to stay present, to get into your body, to realize that, yes, it might be physically uncomfortable, but it's not physically harmful to get through this process, and know that you're not trapped feeling this way forever, because it's all coming from sentences in your mind. And when you are ready, you can begin to change those for the better. So you are never, ever helpless over how you feel. But first of all, you've got to be willing to feel.
Willing to feel. That is powerful.
As many times as you need to, because guess what happens when you no longer fear your feelings? Your life seriously blows open. Like, I honestly have found that our life expands in proportion to our willingness to feel negative and uncomfortable emotion. Like, think about it, if you are willing to feel anything, to feel humiliation and terror and disappointment and grief, there is nothing you won't be willing to do to get what you want in life.
Wow.
I'll leave you all with that.
Great note to end on. Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you all for listening to Building My Legacy podcast today.
You've been listening to Building My Legacy podcast with Dr. Lois Sonstegard. To book your appointment with Dr. Sonstegard, visit www.buildtomorrow.com.